the screen. So what a pleasure to be here, and I can see many familiar names on the participants list, so that's great. So wonderful introduction, Daria, and also very interesting to see your Metro, what was it called, Mentimeter survey there, because a lot of what I'll be talking about will be interesting to pick apart in those priorities that you had. But, you know, I'm going to zoom right into things because we have little time on such a big topic. So we're going to do a big picture glance. And I just love this wise man here, you know, with his looking glass, looking deep into what is the reality of many of us, and that is the increasing digitalization of public services, local government work, and of course of our own work. And I think this is what we have to understand as citizens, as workers in local government, in public services. We are being digitalized all the way through. So some of the impacts and the consequences, I think, are really important, and especially in light of COVID-19. You know, if we look at it, the procurement out and into the private sector from public services, all expectations are this is going to grow immensely as the public budgets, public services are going to be squashed and squeezed because of COVID. Now, you know, we really have to, this is number one, in everything that happens in your local services, in your local government, look at the contract between you as the public service and the private enterprises who are winning the procurement task. What is in the contract there around joint data access and control, around your right as the public service to change the algorithms, and we'll mention why in a minute, or I can already mention an example now. In Sweden, in the UK, there have been grave consequences of poorly managed algorithms, both within welfare systems, childcare, child abuse, school systems, and so forth. Had the local community or the council been governing these algorithmic systems, these digital systems, had they the right then to tell the private sector, we need to change the algorithm, then many of these harms would not have happened. So big urge for you all there is to really make sure that those negotiating these procurement contracts do so with the public services good in mind. You cannot possibly regulate or put services in place in the public interest if you don't have the ability to have the data, the analysis, and the power to change the algorithm. We also have some narratives that are really, we have to poke some holes into them. I mean, I'm sure, and I'd love to hear this from you, but a lot of this new digital technology is creeping into the services, as Daria was talking about, are often sold as being more productive, of increasing efficiency and so forth. Yet, is that really true? We have to ask, productive for whom, for what, and really efficient at what? You know, a public service that's digitalized can be really efficient at doing something which is actually a public harm. So again, when you hear these sort of narratives being sold to you, ask really, who is it productive for? What is it efficient at? And is this a price we want to pay? Now, also, of course, this has a lot to do with new digital systems creeping into human resources. On all levels of government, on all levels of public services, there's now, you know, human resources are using across the world either automated hiring systems, surveillance tools of one kind or the other. And this is, you know, in many areas, something that is creeping up through the back door. And the big question to you is, do you know? Do you know in your workplaces whether there are human resource or worker-facing tools which are reaping you of all of your data and creating all sorts of algorithms and profiles, predictions, as Daria was saying, on you, not just the water meter, but on you. And then, unfortunately, if we zoom out to a global level, there's very little indications that our governments are really prepared to jointly regulate these technologies so that they truly put human rights first. We have lots of fine principles. The OECD, the EU, the United Nations, have UNESCO, have fine AI principles, but when it comes down to putting this into action and saying, and I think Daria's introduction here was brilliant, in the sense that tech can have really good outcomes. Tech can also have really bad outcomes. And the only way we can ensure that this is good for us as workers, as citizens, is if we regulate and govern these technologies. So this is lesson number 4 here. Really, tech is not born evil, tech is not born good. It is how it is framed and applied. Let me just spend a couple of seconds here on the potential harms that we are seeing that these technologies are already inflicting on workers. And this really has to be, of course, dealt with, right? This increasing work intensification, the working time increase, the always on culture of these digital technologies. For those of you who during the pandemic might have been working from home, I can't see the hands, but if I did ask you to put your hands up, I suspect that many of you were suddenly receiving emails late in the evening or responding maybe even to emails, and how work started creeping into all aspects of our lives. A big debate around discrimination, how these algorithmic systems, these data systems are deeply discriminative towards gender, ethnicity, and how the harms of the already marginalized groups are much stronger and very severe. Again, we cannot just flick a button and say that doesn't exist. It surely does, but there's also cultural discrimination. When systems designed, let's say in the United States, are deployed in Kenya or in Oslo, are those systems really culturally sensitive and respectful? Lots of debates around the de-skilling. If we're told algorithmically what to do, we lose our autonomy, we lose our dignity, and we lose sort of this input we have put to our jobs, the skills and the competencies. Mental health. I'm sure many of you have felt during this COVID crisis how the strain of being isolated, of working alone, or if you are an essential worker, being out there on the front lines, how all of this has just increased the pressure on us. So lots and lots of consequences, all of these traditional union concerns. The big difference is, though, they're coming through digital systems, this monitoring and surveillance, and this quantification of us as we are turned into so-called data points. Are you efficient in the morning? Are you kinder in the afternoon? Are women better at this than men? Are young people better than this than older workers? Statistics. The subject of statistics has never been so significant as it is now through these systems. Moving on quickly, what should we do about it? And luckily, we can do things about it. I have a little picture there to say better days are coming. And I truly believe that if the unions really start working on negotiating on some of these issues. Daria hinted at some of them. The first one is around workers' collective data rights. These are poorly defined in all areas of the world, including in the GDPR, where we have data protection, but not necessarily rights. How can we really start to negotiate through collective agreement or through political advocacy for much stronger rights over the data that is extracted on us as we work? But also, and this is meeting a lot of resistance, unsurprisingly so, from tech companies, but this push for the co-governance of these systems. If your municipality, your local government is bringing in an algorithmic system, either facing you as a worker or your co-citizens, you should demand a seat at the table. How can we make sure this system isn't harming groups, individuals? How do we mitigate those harms? How do we change the algorithm so that we remove that? How do we ensure this is a public good and not something that is increasing inequalities? As Daria mentioned, this is a question of power. If we don't have that seat at the table, then we just rely on either no governance, because many public services do not govern these algorithms, nor do private. And we're increasingly seeing the private sector who owns these tools are grabbing the power away from democracy into their own hands. And then I really want to advocate for the right to rest. I think one of the next big revolutions is really going to be around our right to rest. Leave me alone. I am not always traceable, trackable, reachable. This, I think, we should have in mind too. And then, of course, that our employers, when they introduce these systems, and there's some really good examples in the brief that follows this seminar here, but of how they can work with the upskilling, the retraining of the current workforce. This should be an obligation. Right now, it doesn't cost employers anything to automate. It should follow lots of obligations towards ensuring that we workers, no matter what we do, that we are employable going forward. So just briefly, all of this is being wrapped up and worked on in PSI's project, which I'm very honored to be working with you all on, called Our Digital Future. Now, there's a website there, and I'm sure you'll receive these slides after today. But there you can see reports that we've written. You'll be able to see the slides from the training. There'll be some videos and interviews of the participants. And this whole project is about capacity building unions. Regionally, we have already trained what we call the digital rights organizers. I can see some of you on this call here, who will be the regional networks to build the competencies and power of your unions regionally. We're very soon going to start retraining trade union leaders before we later in 2022, 2023, will be training shop stewards and union staff supporting those shop stewards in their negotiations. So this is a really strong capacity building project around these issues. So with those words, thanks for listening, and I'll pass back to Daria. Thank you.